Preparing live stream for meeting. Hold tight. There's a couple different brand options, it says, and it gives you like 3 different options. And I chose one.
That must be new because before there was no branding.
Looks like we're live. Let me just check it. It's on a 20-second delay. So I'm just going to check it here. It says meeting is now streaming and we are live.
Elijah, can
Yep.
you see it, Elijah?
Yep. I'm seeing it now too, guys. So Leon, if you just want to let me know about what time the stream is scheduled to end, and I'll just make sure that we hang tight on here. You should be able to do it too as a host, but just to be safe. You're muted, my friend.
I am no longer the host. You are now the actual host. So
great. So we'll leave it that way.
Okay, perfect.
And I'll just hang tight.
Okay.
I'll unmute everybody, and let me just make sure.
And then the rest of the committee could go on the YouTube page. We can get started.
I'll give you all permission to unmute, and then you should be able to manage yourselves from here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We can get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Crucial Conversations, an election live stream for educating students and the community around us involved in the ESU community. So starting off, I will be your moderator today, Elijah Brown. I am currently the ESU president at ESU and currently a graduate student in political science. Here with me are the different panelists who will be participating in today's Crucial Conversations. First, we have Dr. Kenneth Mash, professor of political science at ESU.
Hi.
Dr. Christopher Brooks, professor of history at ESU.
Hello.
David Super, alum of ESU from the class of 1980 and currently the director of the League of Women Voters of Monroe County.
Good evening, everyone.
And lastly, Caitlin Stout, graduate student of ESU and currently the president of the ESU College Democrats.
Hi, everyone.
So starting off today, we'll be asking a series of different questions regards to Election Day up on November, coming up next week. So first, I'll be asking questions to Dr. Christopher Brooks, and this will be focusing on what to do on Election Day. So the first question is, what do I need to bring with me for Election Day, Dr. Brooks?
Okay, depending on the county you're in, you may actually have to bring a number 2 pencil. I know, for example, Lackawanna County, they supply their own, but some of the counties that are using these, they're called BMDs, ballot marking devices, where you have a paper ballot and they put it through a machine and all this. They may require that, but you can call your county board of elections just to double check. Otherwise, if you're voting for the first time, you will need to bring a state issued photo ID. Some of those IDs, you have your driver's license, a state ID, a PA PennDOT ID. If you're in the armed forces, you could bring that ID, an employee ID, US passport, that kind of
Thank you. I know you answered our second question. Do I need to enter?
They just kind of really blended into. Sorry about that.
You're good, Dr. Brooks. But no, I
could add to that actually, because it kind of piggybacking off of that, because sometimes you may not have a photo ID. Some of the non-photo ID options might be of interest to people. They include a firearms permit, utility bills, paycheck stubs, government checks, confirmation from a county voter registration office that you're a registered voter. I would bring, if you don't have a photo ID, bring as much identification as you possibly can. But obviously the state issued state issued ID is with a photograph is what you really want to bring.
Thank you. Next question I have for you is, what if I sign up to vote by mail ballot but now choose to vote in person at a polling place?
Yeah, this is something that's important to know. So let's assume you asked to vote by mail and you decide, okay, as the question poses, you decide not to. You're allowed to bring your ballot, or you need to bring your ballot and envelope with you to the polling station, and then hand those over to the poll workers, who will then void the mail-in ballot. This is necessary to prove that you're not voting twice, because if you have a mail-in ballot and you say, hey, I changed my mind, and you don't bring that with you, well, that doesn't work. So at that point, you may vote on the machines once you've handed in the ballot, the mail-in ballot, and they voted it.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks. So let's say, I'm going to vote in person, and I go to the people up front who's going to check if I'm registered to vote here. What happens if my name is not in the polling book?
Don't cry, don't fret, don't leave. If it's not in the poll book, you're still legally allowed to vote. What needs to happen so your vote counts is that the local polling officials need to call the County Board of Elections to confirm your registration. They can then determine whether you're registered and if you're at the correct polling station, polling precinct. Sometimes, and I've done this, I've shown up at the wrong polling station, and it's really not a big deal. They just direct you to the correct one, right? If you are registered and in the wrong precinct, like I said, they just send you to the right one. If the Board of Elections cannot find your name in its registration database, or if you're unable to go to another precinct, maybe transportation issues or whatnot, then you are entitled to use a provisional ballot.
Thank you. And this goes up to the follow-up question to that. What is a provisional ballot?
A provisional ballot is a paper ballot that is counted after, usually within 7 days of the election. Well, not usually, it has to be counted within 7 days of the election. And then there's a process which will be explained to you once you arrive at the polling station that they can walk you through. But this is in lieu of, and you have to fill out the ballot sort of in front of a poll worker, and et cetera, et cetera. But there is an option there for you legally.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks. Since we're talking about, voting in person and, talking about polling places, Dave Super, I have a question for you in regards to that. The first question I have, how do I find my polling place?
So very simple. Pennsylvania residents can go to www.pavoterservices.pa.gov. Once you get on the site, they'll ask you to enter your name of your county and your home address. Very simple, and it'll tell you your polling place.
And for those who are not familiar with what exactly a polling place is, do you mind just describing that briefly?
Polling place is where you go to vote. You'll stand in line. There's a judge of elections. There's poll workers. You'll go in. You want me to get into what happens when you get into the locations, or you want to wait for later on that?
We could talk about that right now since we're talking about polling places.
Okay, so polling locations are usually churches, libraries, schools, anywhere there's a building big enough. In this case, for East Stroudsburg wards 1 and 2, they'll be voting at Kaler Fieldhouse this year for the local residents. As an example, they found Kaler was big enough; they can physically distance in that building. The voters could vote in there safely. So I do want to talk about what do you do when you get to the polling place, and we can answer some of your other questions later about when are polls open. But when you arrive at the polling place this year, you need to be prepared to wait in line and be patient. There's going to be campaign workers near the entrance, most likely in a lot of cases. They are mandated to stay a certain distance away from the front door of the polling location. There will be a sign there. They can't go beyond that sign. Unfortunately, this year, there will probably be unauthorized poll watchers. I saw a report, state police tonight said if people in any way try to prevent people from entering the polling location, you are to call 911 and they will connect with the state police. Just unfortunate, poll watchers are required to be registered. And what happens, you may see a poll watcher when you enter the polls. They will be required to sit in a very specific location and not move from that spot. They're not allowed to walk around the polling place or anything like that. So you may see someone sitting in a chair or a couple of people sitting in a chair. That's what they're doing. They're watching what's going on. Election materials such as signs and other items are not allowed inside the polling place, and you will be required to wear a mask and maintain social distancing while you're in the polling place. Once inside, you'll check in with the poll workers. You'll follow their instructions, as the check-in process may have changed from if you voted in the primaries. They probably have changed. I know that Monroe County has changed. They have gone from actually physical books to iPads. So you will sign on an iPad your name. You will on an iPad this year. And if you're eligible to vote on a regular ballot, you'll either be hand mark a paper ballot or vote using the ballot marking device. All Pennsylvania voting systems have been updated since 2018, and every county has different voting systems.
Thank you, Dave. Just a follow-up question, because I know we're talking about inside the polling location, but what time are voters allowed to go to polling locations on election day?
Okay, the polls open at 7 o'clock and they close at 8. One of the things to note is if you are in line by 8 o'clock, the polls will stay open to 8 p.m. to account for anyone who is standing in line at that time. If you get in line after 8 o'clock, you will most likely not be allowed to vote. So it's very important that you arrive before closing time.
Thank you. I have a question from the audience. This is a question to the panel. Is there an accommodation for disabled at polling places? You could go ahead, Katie.
I was going to say that covers one of my questions. So yes, you have the right to assistance if you cannot read or write, if you cannot read the names on the ballots, have difficulty understanding English, are blind, disabled, or unable to operate the voting machine. So you can request help from a relative, a friend, your neighbor, someone else who might have gone with you to vote. You do not necessarily have to be designated as assistance permitted in the polling books. However, the person who is helping you vote, who is assisting you, does have to fill out a assistance declaration, and you have to fill that out as well, unless you are already in the polling books as needing assistance.
Thank you, Katie. Since there's no more questions from the audience, I'll return back to Dave with one last question. Since we're talking about like polling places and stuff like that, my question is, I know I already asked this previously with Dr. Brooks, but this is going to be slightly different. How can you get to a polling location?
Okay, aside from your personal vehicle and public transportation, there's multiple ways to get to the polls. The political parties in each county, the main political parties, the Democrats and Republicans, you can call their headquarters and arrange for a ride to the polls. They do that every year. The local offices are open during this time, during normal business hours. You can call and make an arrangement to get a ride to and from the polls. I also know that both Uber and Lyft are offering discounted rides to polls this year. Uber is 50% off round trips up to $7 each way. Lyft is 50% off with savings up to $10 round trip savings each way. I don't believe SEPTA in Philadelphia is offering any discounts this year. And I will tag on, if any Pennsylvania students with disabilities have concerns about how to get to the polls, if they need a ride, they can call Disability Rights Pennsylvania at 1-800-692-7443.
Thank you, Dave. And for those who are watching in the audience on our YouTube, if you have any questions in regards to this election live stream, please submit your questions onto the YouTube channel. Thank you. And one last question, Dave. And this one was similar to Dr. Brooks is what I meant. Sorry about that previously. This one is like, how do I check if I'm registered to vote? Where can I check this?
Okay, same place. Pennsylvania residents, go to www.pavoterservices.pa.gov. Right there, you can check your status by name or by entering your driver's license number or pen.id. If you're not a Pennsylvania resident listening to this YouTube video session, you can find your voting location. You can find your whether you're registered to vote or not at www.vote.org, and it'll direct you to your specific state.
Thank you. So this question comes from the audience. It says, my mail-in ballot was signed by my son and I signed his by accident. What should I do? This is open to the panel.
My recommendation is that person and their son pay a visit to the county election office.
Thank you.
Because
And
if the signatures don't match, the ballots will be voided.
thank you. And do you mind like asking where they could find these their county offices? It's Google or
You can go under, I would look whatever your county is, go under that county's webpage and look for the county election office.
Thank you, Dave. So I'll be moving on from Dave Super to Dr. Kenneth Mash. Hello, Dr. Mash.
Hi,
So my first question for you is, this is all focusing on early voting for Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
So the first question is, where can I learn more about early voting?
Well, the first thing is that technically speaking, Pennsylvania doesn't have early voting. All we have in Pennsylvania is absentee voting. So that means that you had to have already signed up. And unfortunately, the deadline for signing up for an absentee ballot was the 27th. So that's already passed. So if you had requested that absentee ballot, you would be able to send it in early, or at some of the counties in Pennsylvania, you would still have the option. If you do have your absentee ballot, you can go and just deliver it in person there. But unfortunately, the deadline has passed for that type of voting in Pennsylvania. Other states do allow for it, and so you'd have to check with your state to see if you're eligible to.
Thank you. So this question comes from the audience. Where can I find a sample ballot for my area? And this is open to the panel.
Most of the newspapers, the local newspapers, do print a sample ballot of who's on there, and so that's a good place to check. I don't know if anybody else has any other suggestions.
The League of Women Voters has a votes. You can go under Votes 411 and you can get information on that.
Yeah.
Many county election websites also split between boroughs, townships, and whatever precinct you're in, and they will have a sample ballot online as well.
Thank you, guys.
Actually, there is one last one. In many counties, you tend to mail out a sample ballot. It depends on the county you're in. I know Monroe historically has mailed out a sample ballot about a week or so prior to the election. I don't know if they did this year, but yeah, again, there's 67 counties and 67 rolls on that, at least for Pennsylvania.
And just a follow-up question, Dr. Brooks, is this automatic or is this on request?
That was automatic. I didn't request it. No. You know, when I resided in Monroe County, I remember getting one every year. I looked at.
Thank you. So back to you, Dr. Mash. So we were talking about early voting and where to find that information. I know it's a little late, but like, how do I vote early per se?
Well, if you wanted to vote early, there were two ways that you really could do it. You could sign up online to vote by absentee, or you could request the form, or you could go to the county office. And in fact, while we don't technically have early voting, it was possible while there was the time for that was open to apply, you could have in the very same visit picked up, filled out the application for the absentee ballot at many of the county offices, filled it out, and then handed it back in right there at the county office.
Thank you. So this moves away from early voting to like preparation for election day. So this is a personal question. How do you prepare for election day? And is it different this year to previous years?
Yeah, I'll answer that. I do want to back up for a second too. If people did request a ballot to, an absentee ballot, it's important to understand that that ballot is supposed to be there it has to be postmarked by election day, and it has to be received within 3 days after that. In fact, the Supreme Court just today made a ruling on this, but it has to be in the office. Now, the Pennsylvania Secretary of State and others are actually at this point, because of concerns about mail, are instructing people that they probably, from this point on, should not be putting their absentee ballots in the U.S. Postal Service. It's better for them to deliver it in person to the county office, or drop it off at the polling place, or if there are designated drop-off spots in their county, to use one of those. There's some concern that the mail will not get there in time. So just to be safe, it's good to do that. Now, as far as preparing to vote, of course, what you want to do is try and do some research. We want to remember that while the election of a president is extremely important, that there are a number of candidates on the ballot. All of the state row offices are on the ballot. Our state House is on the ballot, all of it, and a portion of our Senate is on the ballot as well. And there may be local officials on the ballot. So you want to make sure that you do what you can to learn about them. A great place to go is, as Dave can tell you, to the League of Women Voters website to learn information about who the candidates are. Look in the local newspaper. Most local newspapers, either the day before or even the day of, will put a lot of information about candidates in the newspaper so that you can read about them. And of course, we're all blessed now to live in the age of the internet. And once you find out who is running, you can, of course, do your own research that way. But it's very helpful to prepare yourself. You asked the question about the ballot earlier and the sample ballot. That's a great question, because it's good to prepare yourself to know who you're going to vote for before you get to the voting booth.
Thank you, Dr. Mash. So this question comes from the audience and is open to the panel to answer. Why is it important to vote?
I mean, well, I'll start. It's extremely important to vote because, first of all, what we want to do is we want to appreciate the great efforts that people have made in the past to try and ensure that the franchise is open to everyone. And we're talking about people who sacrificed their lives, physical harm, in order to be able to make sure that people have the opportunity to vote. And it is a very simple thing to do, and it is a civic responsibility to participate in elections. And what we need to understand too is if you don't vote, and I've had, teaching American government classes, I've had a number of students who say they don't like politics, or they want to stay away from it. But the bottom line is this: if you don't vote, essentially what you're doing is you're giving over your power to the people who do choose to vote, right? Your share of power over the system, you've handed it over to others to make a decision for you. And that's really not a healthy way to behave in a democracy. And also, it is good for one's self-esteem to participate and to make sure that their voice is heard.
Thank you, Dr. Match. Would anybody else like to answer this, or we can move on?
You hit the nail on the head.
Great answer.
Thank you. Time to move forward. I would like to say goodbye to Dr. Brooks. He would have to hop off for this for the live stream. But thank you.
Unfortunately. Good night, guys.
Thank you. So moving forward, one of the things that, one of the biggest things this year is COVID-19. And if you're voting in person, there's concerns about that. So this question is, how do you protect yourself from COVID on election day?
Well, I mean, I'm not a doctor, so, and I'm not a scientist. So, I mean, all I could do is relate what I understand to be the case, which is, of course, that what we want to do is wear a mask, which you're required to do in the polling place. You want to maintain social distance, and you want to use hand sanitizer when you're touching things. And I do believe that most of the polling places do have hand sanitizer there so that you can, use the pencils that are there if necessary, or sign in and still have the opportunity to make sure that you're using hand sanitizer.
And if I can add to that, I know Monroe County's, my wife is actually a judge of elections for Stroud 4. They will be cleaning the tables regularly after people get off the vote, after they've completed their writing in their ballot. And they will have masks available as well for people who don't have them. You will be required absolutely to wear a mask.
Thank you. Anything else before I move on to an audience question? Okay, so this comes from the audience, as I said. Many students may be registered at the university but are home now. How likely are they to accept provisional ballots for this election under these circumstances? And this is open to the panel.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes.
So, they're registered at East Stroudsburg, but they're not voting, but they're not coming here to vote.
Yes, because they're currently not in the state, or they're somewhere else at this point in time.
If they didn't request an absentee ballot, they won't be able to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And it's too late to request an absentee ballot now.
I did want to add something from something that was mentioned earlier too, and that is, you can check the status of your ballot online too, once you've mailed it in. So you can go to the Department of State site and they'll redirect you to where you need to look. But if you put in your information that you put on the absentee ballot on election day, they will tell you that your vote has been counted. Also, if you did receive a ballot, you applied for one and you don't have it and you still want to go vote, what you should do is you should go to your polling place and inform them that you did apply for an absentee ballot, you don't have it with you, but you still want to vote. And in that instance, they will give you a provisional ballot to fill out to make sure that that you're not voting twice, but you will still have the opportunity to vote.
Thank you, Dr. Mash. This is a second question from the audience. Will they provide masks to voters present without those? So to repeat the question for those who didn't hear, will they provide masks to voters who don't currently have one of them?
I think it depends on the voting board. I know in Monroe County, they will have masks available at each polling location. I don't know what the other counties in Pennsylvania are going to do.
Thank you, Dave. Here's a third question from the audience. If I've dropped off my ballot at one of the designated areas in Pennsylvania, can I track it like how they track mail-in ballots?
It's the same procedure.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, I just double checking with something.
Yeah.
Thank you for the answer, Dr. Mash. Anybody else like to add to that, or we could move on with the questions for Dr. Mash? Okay. We already talked about COVID. Would anybody else like to have an input in relation to protect yourself from COVID on election day? No? All right. So I'll be moving on to Katie. So my first question, Katie, can someone assist me at the polls?
Yeah, I already answered that, but yes, so you can have somebody assist you at the polls, and I'll reiterate my answer from earlier. You have the right to assistance if you cannot read or write, if you cannot read the names on the ballot, if you have difficulty understanding English, if you are blind, disabled, or unable to operate the voting machine. So you can have a friend, a relative, a neighbor, someone else who is there voting with you to help you and assist you with your ballot. You do not necessarily have to be designated in the poll book as assistance permitted. However, to receive your assistance, you will have to fill out an assistance declaration. And that just makes it so that the poll watchers and the people who are in the polling place, the election officials, know that nobody is just randomly in the voting booth with you.
Thank you, Katie.
Mm-hmm.
So the second question in relation to election day, especially in polling places. I know Dave partially answered this earlier in regards to this, but who can be inside the polling places?
Sure. So only the following people can be inside of the polling place. That would be the precinct election officials, a constable or multiple constables, polling place clerks, machine inspectors, approved poll watchers. Now with COVID, there will be a certain amount of people allowed in the building, so no more than 10 people in the process of voting, approved people assisting voters as well. Police officers may also be in the building if they are in the act of voting or if they have been called to the polling place to preserve the peace. Everyone else, including individuals handing out campaign literature, must remain at least 10 feet away from the entrance of the polling place.
Thank you, Katie. So this is a follow-up question to this question. And I know Dave mentioned it earlier briefly, but this one is in regards to what happens if I'm personally intimidated at the polls by someone?
Sure. So that is a huge concern in this election, unfortunately. So in Pennsylvania, it is illegal for any person or corporation through intimidation or coercion to induce or compel a person to vote or refrain from voting for a particular candidate or on a particular political issue. So if you have experienced this intimidation at the polls, or if you unfortunately might experience it at the polls, we suggest calling the district attorney's office and notifying the your county board of election. You can also submit a complaint to the Department of State using an online form, or you can call 1-877-VOTES-PA, which is 1-877-868-3772, and explain what's going on. And another thing I wanted to mention that I don't think we've mentioned previously is that when you go to vote, it's important to know that you cannot be in the polling in line wearing any clothing that might identify your political preference, your candidate's preference. Some people will be, poll watchers will turn you away. So it's important to note that you don't have your political candidate's mask on or t-shirt on or any buttons. Regular clothes is perfectly fine, just nothing that might identify who you're voting for or what you believe in.
Thank you, Katie. Mm-hmm. Since we're done with the questions that we have selected already,
Elijah, can I just jump in on Katie's answer?
Go ahead.
Katie, I think your answer was really good about intimidation at the polls. I would just think the first step would be to seek out if you're concerned that there's intimidation going on outside the election area, that should be brought to the attention of the judge of elections who's in charge of that particular polling location, so they know. And they can take action right away to do something about it.
Thank you, Dave. So we have a question from the audience. it says, if you lost your mail-in ballot, will you still be able to vote?
Yeah. So what you want to do if you've lost your mail-in ballot is go to your polling place, but you need to explain to them that that's what happened, and they will allow you to fill out a provisional ballot. And again, what they want to make sure is, since you've signed up for it, you'll be on record for that you had signed up for it. They just want to make sure that you're not voting twice. So your vote will be counted, although it will be counted afterwards when they have an opportunity to check through the absentee ballots.
Thank you, Dr. Mash. So since we're out of like questions pre-selected, I just have a question in general for everyone. You can all answer one at a time. What do you say to new voters who are voting for the first time in 2020? What would you say to them?
I would say make sure you do your research. I know this is a very exciting election. I know that this is a very important election. Every election is important, but this is a very important election. 2016 was my first election to vote in, and I was fired up and ready to go. And I know so many 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds are fired up and ready to go, but just try to control that excitement when you get to the polls, and make sure you get that I voted sticker, because that is the best part of your voting experience, your first time voting experience. But I would just say research, and of course, maintain social distancing, wear your mask. But it is a really fulfilling experience. So to take that time to really understand the impact that you as one person is having on your county and your state, take that and really just run with it, but control that excitement when you get in there, and don't get nervous either. Because I know I was so nervous when I walked into the booth and it was my first time and I was shaking and I was like, oh no, I don't know what to do. What do I do? What do I do? Just breathe, relax. It's exciting. It's a fun experience. So I would just say research and have fun with it.
Thank you, Katie. Dave, Ken, or Dr. Mash, would you like to?
Yeah, sure. I would just say welcome to your, and thank you for your participation in this ongoing experiment in American democracy, which is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination and has been tested in ways that none of us might have expected it had been tested. But it's through your participation that our country, our state, your local government will move forward through this century, and that you are participating in making life better for everyone around you.
Thank you, Dr. Mash. Dave, would you like to have an input, or?
I can't add to that. I think they're both terrific answers and hit the mark.
Thank you, Dave. So we do have a question from the audience. Are felons allowed to vote in Pennsylvania?
Convicted felons after they've served their sentence?
I guess we can answer for both right now, just because it's not specified. It just is asked, are felons allowed to vote in Pennsylvania? So we could say after they serve their sentence and during their sentence.
I think every state has different rules on that. I'm not sure about Pennsylvania's rules. I know there was a lot of publicity in Florida this year about not giving felons the right to vote down there until they paid all their fines. But I'm not sure what the status is in Pennsylvania. Dr. Mack, do you know?
I really don't know. I would certainly, what I would do is I would call the elections office in the county just to make sure what the rules are with regard to what your status is, and to be able to be specific about your status and whether you are on probation and parole, whatever the status is when you're talking to them. But anyway, you would have to have registered by now to vote.
Right.
I have the Votes PA website up right now. You are not eligible to register to vote if you are currently confined in a penal institution for conviction of a felony and will not get released from confinement until after the next election. This is even if you are also incarcerated for one or more misdemeanor offenses. There are also other bullet points underneath. You are not eligible to register to vote if you are in a halfway house or other alternative correctional facility on pre-release status for conviction of a felony and who will not get released until after the date of the next election. And you are not eligible to register and vote if you got convicted of violating any provision of the Pennsylvania election code within the last 4 years.
Thank you, Katie.
Mhm.
Would you just mind just repeating the website and where you found that, just for them to have again?
Sure. So you can find all of this information on votespa.com/register to vote. And then there will be a pages tab, a drop down tab, and you can go to convicted felonies. And all that information will be right there.
Thank you. Since we're approaching 8 p.m., I would like to start wrapping up our live stream. So, you guys give final comments, just prior to wrapping up.
Yeah, I just, I think it's very important, particularly this year, that everybody has a plan about how they're going to vote. And so, you want to, have that plan, know ahead of time when you're going to be going there. Bear in mind that there may be long lines. As Dave suggested earlier, you really want to get there well before 8 o'clock. But if you're online, you don't want to get off of line because if you are online by 8, you will get to vote. But, think about the things that you might need. Think about the weather in case you have to wait outside, use the restroom before you go. So, you want to just make sure you have a plan. And what we know is that those people who actually do make a plan are far more likely to actually go vote too. So thinking about these things is an encouragement to yourself to go vote.
Thank you, Dr. Mash. Katie, Dave wants to go.
I would have to agree, make a plan. I know personally, my plan for every election that I voted in since I turned 18 was I wake up at 6:30, I'm out the door, and I'm at the polling location at 7 o'clock in the morning. It is just what works best for me. I always like to be number 1 in the poll book. Unfortunately, I was number 19 on my first election. So I'm really striving for number 1. I don't know if I'll actually get it this time, but definitely make a plan. Watch the weather. I'm not sure what the weather is going to be like, but like Dr. Mash said, watch the weather. I'm definitely going to throw a lawn chair in the back of my car, maybe some snacks. Nothing's stopping me. I'm going, man. I'm going. Nothing's going to stop me.
Thank you, Katie.
Yep.
Dave?
I would just say that this is really a critical election this year. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, I think it's really important. You can't sit on the sideline this year. You have to get out and you have to vote. It's too critical not to. Some parties count on you not voting, so don't let them win. Go and vote. Your vote determines how much money your district, your county gets, how much money your state gets. It's so critical whether healthcare gets passed, whether the things that are important to you get done. It all starts with you getting up and going to the voting place on November 2nd. So you have to go.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you guys for coming out to the Crucial Conversations live stream hosted by ESU Diversity and Inclusion Committee and the ESU Student Government Association, and with our fellow panelists, Katie Stout, Dave Super, Dr. Mash, and Dr. Brooks, who's not currently here with us. Thank you all and have a good night.
Thanks, Elijah.